significant barriers to having their learning recognized and their credentials recognized in a way that's really going to lead to true social and economic mobility. And additionally, there's no systemic way to recognize prior learning that leads to mobility. Um, Additionally, nationwide, on the next slide, you can see here that student outcomes are even more inequitable when they are disaggregated by income, race, and ethnicity, and age. Martha, if you mind switching to the next slide, please. Perfect. So on this side, I'll put the link to this research in the chat for folks. But you can see that on this graph that by the Community College Research Center and the Aspen Institute, it really confirms the reality of our transfer outcome inequitability. On the far right, you can see a display of the transfer cohort bachelor's degree completion as just one example of how dismal, unfortunately, the national outcomes are. But that is where ATAIN comes in. Next slide, please. You're going to learn a lot about the ATAIN project today, but really, this is an incredible solution that will aim to eliminate the frustration and the friction and the uncertainty that is happening with credit transfer at the moment. And so I'm going to hand it to Laura to dig into a little bit more about ATTAIN and this great solution to the problem.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Welcome, everybody. My name is Laura Couturier, and I'm with SOVA. And I'm going to turn it over in just a moment to Dr. Zach Pardos, who's going to talk about his research that supports ATTAIN. But I wanted to share that the solution at hand is going to have really three primary components. The first is to harness AI to produce equivalence recommendations with the goal of expanding equivalencies exponentially. So there'll be a national database with course equivalencies loaded into it, and AI will be able to produce additional recommendations. That database will have some workload reduction features. So we're really hoping to reduce the administrative burden of credit evaluation for institutions with some workflow tools that will manage articulation requests and decisions, be able to intake transcripts and conduct credit evaluation, manage the credit evaluation process. In a future release, and we'll talk more about this, then there will be a feature added that is student-facing, allowing students to receive individualized program mapping and course selection guidance. So it's a really exciting combination of features. And just quickly on who's in ATTAIN, we are a collective of the American Association of Community Colleges and the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, bringing their membership and national influence to the fore of this work. The UC Berkeley Computational Approaches to Human Learning Research Lab is the tech and AI experts for this, and our organization SOVA is the project manager, and we do of course want to thank the generosity of our funders. College Futures Foundation has made this first cohort of ATTAIN possible. So now it's my great pleasure to turn the mic over to Zach Pardos. Zach, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar. Lots of initiatives going on. Hopefully coming out of this, you'll feel like you understand why we think this is distinctive. So I'm Zach Pardos. I'm an associate professor at the UC Berkeley School of Education, and I've been studying AI in education since 2006, and studying AI in higher education since 2013. My background is computer science, and we've been committed to studying AI for higher education administration and AI specifically for articulation and transfer since around 2016, 2015 or so. Okay, so I'm going to take 10 minutes of your time here to explain the research that my lab conducted with other colleagues that informs the ATAIN effort. And then a little bit about the software platform that's being built as part of ATAIN, also informed by the latest research from the lab. The lab, call it CAL, but that's abbreviation for Computational Approaches to Human Learning. And it studies AI for credit mobility, AI for course recommendation, how to use the latest recommender systems, algorithms that are being used at Netflix and so forth, but in an academic administrative context, how it can serve students, administrators. And then the lab also develops a completely open source adaptive tutoring tool that we developed called Open Adaptive Tutor. So the lab's journey to begin on this road, this path of AI in higher education began in 2015. And I think we were the first to receive an NSF grant to apply the latest generation of AI, which is considered neural networks, to higher education data. So we've been thinking about this for a while and the directions it could go in, talking to stakeholders and policymakers, and gearing up for this kind of initiative to make a difference for students and institutions. So a summary of the technical side of the research, what the algorithm does or what it leverages in order to make estimates of course equivalency, to suggest to administrators, to suggest to faculty, to make the whole process of evaluating transfer credit more streamlined and efficient, is depicted on this slide. So work that we conducted in 2019 on algorithmic articulation found that catalog descriptions, while they're imperfect, do provide a certain level of fidelity when it comes to predicting if two courses across different institutions will have a faculty established articulation or established articulation by whatever mechanism is involved at the receiving institution. We also found that enrollment data can further enhance the fidelity of that match. So sometimes catalog descriptions could be out of date, or incomplete. Enrollment data in this study in 2019 showed that it could help fill in some of the deficits of catalog descriptions. Recently, we found that using modern techniques, so 2019 was before LLMs, before ChatGPT, if we now use the very cutting edge and contribute a little bit to methods for improving cutting edge NLP, we get a much bigger bump in the fidelity of that algorithm, so much so that even catalog descriptions alone appear to be getting us just about as much as the enrollment plus catalog descriptions gave us. Part of what we do, what the research has shown in a paper we're about to come out with, of what helps in making this equivalence prediction is to have existing articulations that the algorithm can learn from and align to. So it allows for us to get a sense of what the precedent has been for percentage overlap needed to establish an articulation. And we have a data-driven method to establish that threshold and then incorporate that into the prediction. Eventually, getting articulations accepted is not just a technical process. We can write all the papers we like about increasing percentage of accuracy. This is a human socio-technical system. And so we've also looked into how well the presentation of this information to articulation staff, how well this leads to greater acceptance of articulation recommendations and the things that can hold that back. There's something called AI aversion, which is general idea of subject matter experts being more likely to dismiss AI recommendations than the same recommendations from their peers. And the literature has something to say about how to mitigate this. And so we've been following best practices in the design of the software that practitioners and staff will use. We've deployed, the lab has early versions of this system, early versions of the algorithm from 2018 onwards in different systems, SUNY, CUNY, with the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others, and recently started consulting with the Foundation for California Community Colleges to help them with using this kind of technology for Common Course numbering. None of the data that was used by Cal or was part of the collaborations will be repurposed for ATAIN. It'll be a separate data usage agreement for ATAIN, a separate transfer of data, but we certainly are going to reuse the lessons learned from the research of the lab. A quick demo, what might this look like? What might be in the hands of stakeholders at your institutions? Something like this. So imagine the use case is someone in transfer admissions is evaluating a transcript from a transfer student applicant. They look at the transcript and then they find that there's a course, Computer Literacy and Microcomputer Applications, coming from Palmer College. It'll load in the department and description. It'll also, and then you have your home institution here. And it might be, and so this is a case of upward transfer example, but lateral is also supported. It'll tell you what other institutions have already accepted this course for credit, right? So this gets an institution, staff and faculty out of the bubble or silo of, and realizing, there is precedent being set by peers. So there's that social signal of what others are doing. If there's an existing articulation that a receiving institution has for this course, it'll show that result first, and then followed by a relevance sorted ordering of algorithmic suggestions. So even if there's no articulated course, it'll show a suggestion if there's an above threshold suggestion that the algorithm believes is above the current threshold for articulations. Following that feature, that will be the base feature, will be a feature that allows for you to upload a transcript if the transcript's coming from another member of the ATTAIN network. After uploading that transcript, it'll parse out the course IDs and it'll generate a report of what courses already have articulations accepted at your institution, and then among the ones that don't, which courses the algorithm suggests you should consider for a match, and then which ones don't satisfy any of those conditions that you may want to ascribe generic credit to, elective credit, or reject. The system will, in its use, will also generate statistics, analytics that haven't been available to leadership before. These kinds of analytics will include the percentage of coverage, of articulation coverage your institution has to either the rest of the system or to common feeder schools that you want to define or common receiving schools that you want to define. So this allows leadership to see if they're improving in terms of that articulation coverage. And we use AI to give a sense of, well, how far are you from the maximum reasonable amount of articulation, as opposed to articulating every single program, even programs that you wouldn't expect to be offered at the receiving school. So this is also a mechanism for institutional leaders and even system leaders if, to be able to look at these measures and set goals. And then finally, in order to know who to route certain credit approval decisions to, we will be requesting what the policy is at the department or campus or system level when it comes to articulations, who's allowed to accept credit for the intro stats course, who's allowed to establish an articulation. And once we know that, we'll also be able to have a sense research-wise of how idiosyncratic are these policies, right? We'll never call out individual institutions when it comes to that kind of analysis, but this is something the field is missing, is an understanding of how consistent or inconsistent or regular or irregular credit equivalence policies are. In the future, so I want to say there's the algorithm's doing the suggestion, but your existing policies for human review and acceptance will still remain. But we know even though we can make that process and will make that process more efficient with the use of AI, we're still not going to be able to cover everything. because prospective, proactive articulation between every system across all states is just not plausible without more AI assistance. So in the future, you'll be able to define which decisions from which schools you want to defer to an AI policy, and you'll have the ability to improve that policy, to audit it. But that is one way where you could say, all right, any transfers from this out-of-state system, we'll allow for an AI policy. But that's far down the road. The focus right now is to improve the efficiency of manual review. Coming in summer 2025 will be an AI-assisted transfer planner that puts together a transfer plan for a student and their advisor while they're at a sending institution, letting them know based on the courses you've already taken, what other courses should you consider in the current or next semester that will satisfy a degree requirement at a specified destination school and major, or a collection of them. And I want to say this is a very early stage ideation about this, but it is based on algorithmic work the lab has conducted. One of the things I'm most excited about for this ATAIN cohort is that you won't just be users of the system, you'll be co-designers. And this is the opportunity to get in at the ground floor level and be telling us what are the killer features you wish you had. And that is what this vehicle of ATAIN is designed to do, is bootstrap bootload this tool that is meant to be as useful for you as possible. And so your feedback will be a critical part of this. And thank you to our funders who are getting us off the ground and who have got us off the ground with the research. And I'll throw it back to our main slide deck. So if Martha, you could reshare, great. Advance, I think 2 slides here. And one more. All right, thank you. So yeah, there's going to be many approaches that incorporate AI ostensibly. It's just the age we are in. If you're not doing AI, what are you up to? I think a distinction here is we have a 10-year history of using neural networks for higher ed administration and working with a variety of stakeholders across the nation on how to apply those tools responsibly. And the lab, I think, has an unrivaled record of research in this area that ATAIN and its software is going to be informed by stakeholders. So that's one distinctive aspect. The technology is also already being used to some effect within California, New York, and Texas. And that has been thanks to a number of grants the lab has received over the past several years. ATAIN is also committed to a number of public benefit goals. Open sourcing Creative Commons of articulations that institutions upload, unless you opt out of making those open. If there's not an opt-out, I think this information should be freely available and not trapped in systems, including our own. It should be easily downloadable. We also are going to advocate for open standards for defining degree requirements and working with collaborators and organizations to solidify those open standards. And so we're happy to be committed to openness and transparency in this effort. And I'll now kick it to Martha for the next slide.
Forgive me, the slides are advancing very slowly, so bear with us here. Thank you, Zach. And again, I'm filling in for Dr. Angel Royal, who is our point person on this. But I do think she wanted to talk a little bit about the potential for transforming how we do this work currently, and the value to society, including, just a transparent level of transparency about how credit evaluation is done, creating new norms for recognizing the different forms of learning, alternate forms of learning, to incentivize fair treatment of students and learning, putting the power into the hands of the students with their journey, and improve those equitable learner outcomes because of that transparency. The value, obviously, to the learners is, again, putting that credit evaluation information into their hands. They would own their records rather than the institutions owning them, and to provide individualized guidance to learners. And I will let Karen talk about the value to institutions.
And I think if you can advance the slide too, Martha, that'd be great because we know it's slow. Hi, everybody. Karen Vignari with the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. We're really excited to be part of this project. As Heather has already showed, the outcomes and the potential of students actually getting through the community colleges into baccalaureate degrees is incredibly important today for them and for many of our institutions. So increasing enrollment is certainly one of the things that we think about, but it's also being able to give students data that they need about where they are in the process of seeking their degree. The other part of this is really about, and I think Zach's work really explains this, is the fact that right now we have inconsistent and somewhat indiscriminate processes as we have overloads by advisors and those people who are approving this. And we all know we have staff turnover. So it's really important that the technology can help us try to lower those internal barriers and give us systematic processes that our students can count on. And ideally, the number of graduates, we get both from an AA or an AS program into full undergraduate degrees and maybe onward is really important. We have way too many students for decades and decades that we have failed to get through our institutions. And this is a huge opportunity to improve the process for them. I think we're moving on, Martha.
I love that the slide deck is just giving us a moment of reflection and to just make sure we've understood what we've just said and that you've heard us. So this is on an animation, Martha, so you might want to get rolling on the dates. But I'm going to go over a brief timeline. I've answered a couple of questions in the Q&A about this as well, and I can share some links with you there. We have the application open now live on our website. The priority deadline for the application is January 24th, 2025. And a general arc of this first cohort, this inaugural cohort, will be that we notify institutions of their acceptance sometime in mid-February. There will definitely be an online orientation and onboarding. We're also going to provide in February and March some technical assistant office hours to help institutions with any of the data questions that they might have, and provide any feedback if there's confusion over what needs to be submitted. And then by April, spring, summer of 2025, there'll be access to the system for the institutions. And then further, as Zach said, into the summer and fall of 2025, some of the advanced features will be rolled out. On the next slide, we're going to start talking a little bit about where you can apply, and I will hand it to Anki for that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heather. Now that everyone's gotten to see the projects, the products, and the promises that ATAIN looks to deliver, we're hoping that you're excited to join the ATAIN network. Our application is live, and the priority deadline will be January 24, 2025. That can be found on our website at ATAIN or attain.org. This website contains information about ATAIN, any FAQs that you may have while you're navigating the application process and that we're unable to get to today, and actually contains the application itself. So if you want to take a look at that, and the Jan 24 deadline will give you time through the end of this academic or this calendar year, a little bit into the new year. And yeah, let's go to the next slide. Great. So to help out with the application process, and if there are any looming questions about the data, technical, project, or logistics questions, the ATTAIN team will have some representatives holding office hours on this upcoming Monday and Tuesday. Our Monday time will be 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and on Tuesday it'll be 2:30 to 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. And we also hope to have weekly office hours through January 2025 through that Jan 24 window, just so that we can help you get all of your data in order and make sure that everything's set for you to join the ATTAIN network. Next slide.
It's thinking about it.
Great. And that's all we got. Thank you so much for listening. I'll hand it to the meeting organizer to help coordinate any Q&As that you may have, but thanks so much for learning more about ATTAIN.
Yes, thank you all. We do have some questions. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or several of you have also started putting them into the Q&A section, which is totally fine. And so with that, I'm going to just go through some questions. And we can certainly get our esteemed panelists to answer them. But before I get too far into that, I just wanted to note the website is ATAIN, so it's attain with a slightly misspelled word, .org. So just make sure you're putting in the correct website when you're going to look. And with that, I'm going to ask what experience or connection with guided pathways or the pathways maps work that has been done at the community colleges is working. And Lara, I see you are answering, but is there anyone that wants to speak to the community college pathways work?
Thank you, Martha. I was actively typing, but I'll go ahead and voice over my response and would invite others to join in as well. But I'll just note that the partners in ATTAIN are deeply experienced with the guided pathways movement and have a very deep understanding of all of that work that's gone on, and in particular, the program mapping piece. I would say that that will be of particular relevance to ATTAIN for the student-facing program mapping feature, where ATTAIN will be ingesting degree requirements from program maps to allow students to map their documented learning against those and see what's left and what their optimal pathway to completion would be. So I think, from my perspective, the connections are very deep. Karen, I see you nodding, and I know APLU has been very active. I'm wondering if you wanted to add anything.
That's what I get for being so excited about this process.
Yes.
I think Laura actually explained it. I mean, the idea that both our institutional staff can be working with students in a way that is very visible and transparent is just a huge boost to everyone involved, right? And so being able to see where you are on the pathway, once our institutions get started using this, I think is going to be extremely valuable. Most of our institutions, when they have good technology, it is shared immediately, kind of either online or with a student while you're having a meeting. So that visible nature will help make those pathways clearer to students. And we would assume that leads to a lot more success for our students.
I'm going to go in order. I think the first question I'm going to ask is probably for Dr. Pardos. And it looks like he has already answered it, so I will move along. Uh, what institutions applying, what are the institutions applying to actually do or participate in? They're looking for details about what is expected of the participating colleges and universities. So Lara, you want to take that one?
I'm happy to take that. So this is a great question. So we are, first of all, encourage you to definitely take a look at the website and the FAQ. My colleague Heather has been putting that into the Q&A. So that will answer a lot of your questions. But in addition, in cohort 1, we're looking to onboard 60 institutions into the National Course Equivalency Database. Institutions will be asked to submit data. The FAQ does give examples of the data that we'll be looking to collect from institutions. There will be technical assistance for that process and strong guidance given on that data submission. Then from there, institutions will have the option of signing up to join in the advanced features cohort, and that cohort will then be a part of the student-facing individualized course selection guidance and program mapping feature. We are also asking institutions to, appoint a project lead and to participate in a community of practice, because we are hoping with this cohort to really build a learning community. As Zach noted, we are really inviting institutions in to help us make this great. We think it's great already, but we know it can be better, I should say. And so that community of practice will be a rich learning environment. I'm sure there are more questions that you have about what exactly this would look like. I'm going to pause though and just invite Zach. Zach, are there other things you would want to share in response to that question?
I've been answering some others. Can you reiterate which question?
Oh, sorry. Just what are the institutions applying to participate in?
What will they be participating in?
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
the expectation for the colleges that are participating?
Two things: to share a basic data ask, which is catalog descriptions, and if you're a receiving institution, the articulations that you have to sending schools that you approve. And secondly, perhaps most importantly, to use the tool. The usage of these tools is being completely paid for, subsidized by College Futures for the first year. Usage of the tool will prompt you to give feedback on where you see it improving things, where you see it could be improving things even more. Usage of the tool will also generate the kind of analytics that the dashboard will be able to display, and you won't be able to evaluate the utility of those analytics without it being used in your workflow. I want to connect to a question someone asked about interoperability. Does the system sync up with other data sources like UAchieve or Banner and so forth? Initially, when rolled out the first month, it won't, but we have secured separate funding specifically to investigate, to support interoperability with 2 to 3 systems. And we will be querying the accepted initial cohort for what kind of systems store currently your articulations, for example, or what kind of systems you would need accepted equivalent credit for a transfer student for that acceptance decision to be reflected in, right? So that it reflects on the student's degree audit and so forth. So we want to get a list of where would the best bang for the buck be in demonstrating interoperability with another system, because decisions about equivalence and articulation will be made in our system, but it can't be a silo, needs to be reflected somewhere else. Also, if decisions or information is in those systems, let's say even just the course catalog system, we would prefer, as would you, not to require someone from IR or wherever in the institution to every term re-upload the latest catalog descriptions. We'd rather be able to sync up with your systems, so that happens automatically. So we will be supporting a number of system interoperability to achieve that. But I guess that gets to, before that interoperability is available, the other ask is that you keep your data fresh in the system. There are a number of public articulation data sets. Right now, we're not relying on those sources. It's not a given that those data are available policy-wise for us to ingest, even if they're public systems. And so we're completely relying on the receiving institutions to share their most up-to-date articulations. And we believe by getting it directly from the institution, it will be the most up-to-date. And so that's an ask, is every term, upload your latest articulations and your latest catalog descriptions.
And Zach, there's some themes going on with the questions, so I'd like to kind of at least ask these two in the public format so that everyone can hear the answer. And I think this speaks to a little bit about what you were just saying. How does this product compare to other products? There's several: TES Advantage, some things. So I guess what does ATAIN do that these current products don't do?
So, I mean, being in this field and talking to stakeholders and some of the operators of some of those platforms, I can give my current perspective on that. I'll just, for full disclosure, I haven't done a full, what might be called a competitive analysis with TES Advantage. So I don't know about TES Advantage in particular. I know about TES. So I believe we are using the highest accuracy algorithmic approach to this, because it's not just taking off the shelf OpenAI, it's called embeddings or sentence. But there's a number of off the shelf approaches one can take to being able to mathematically compare courses to one another. We have compared to that standard off the shelf approach and found that extra tuning, extra alignment that debiases an institution's kind of vernacular or style of describing a course, if you're able to smooth that over and get rid of different kind of idiosyncratic details in a catalog description, like, you know, how this fits into the major or what times the courses meet, what sometimes it's kind of accidentally put into the description, you get a way higher fidelity of accuracy. So I think we've worked on that more than anyone else. Also, the incorporation in phase 2 of the transfer planner, because these things are related. They at first feel like two separate efforts. One is the articulation process, right? And how administrators work with that, and the technologies around storing articulations, recommending articulations. There's a number of efforts which I support. I think there should be as many tries at this as possible, and then to see what works and for that to perhaps prevail or to merge. But yes, central storage of articulations. I think we're doing articulation recommendation the best. But then when a student is planning a number of candidate destinations to transfer to, this is when, one, they benefit from already there being an expansion in credit mobility pathways through, let's say, acceptance by staff and faculty of articulation recommendations at the receiving school. But then there is also this opportunity for this kind of proactive articulation, where if the receiving school decides for a particular set of sending schools to use an AI policy, then the student can know what they're guaranteed to be accepted without having to apply and then for that to trigger those decisions, right? Because usually it's an on-demand basis where, okay, well, when you receive a transcript from a school you've never seen before, then you consider if it's going to be transferable. But how many applications are you not getting and will never get from a school because you don't have any existing articulations, right? It's sort of like, well, you need to articulate for them to feel comfortable even applying. And so if we can be proactive and let them know, okay, this school has a policy that the algorithm says we'll honor this. And if after seeing those those credits come in and you grant them because they were guaranteed that, you decide you don't want to grant that in the future, you can veto it. You can send the algorithm feedback that, no, we don't like this. Please improve, how you consider things. But I think there are futures for what this could lead to that greatly benefits institutional efficiency, that greatly benefits student transfer mobility, that this is a cross-state effort. And these futures that have AI as a critical component are not futures that other efforts are envisioning. That's kind of a hand-wavy thing. If you want a more specific response, I can give one. I just can't give one to test advantage. I haven't looked at that.
Understood. Will it be able to make a distinction between a one-time course substitution and a fully articulated course?
It will make a distinction between a one-off credit equivalency that's maybe given on a per student basis and a precedent-setting articulation. Yes, there'll be a separate policy defined by the institution and its departments and so forth, whether a particular staff member or faculty has the authority for one-off credit approval for particular types of courses versus establishing kind of a permanent rule.
Next question. There are a lot of nuance in how we create articulations. Some are direct equivalencies, some are acceptable alternatives, some are many-to-many, etc. Does this tool allow for different kinds of articulations?
It will. That is definitely true, this nuance. The one-to-many, where let's say where receiving school accepts a calculus course from a sending school, and there are two options for it being accepted as, let's say, a math major specific course or like calculus for engineers course. When you have that option, that will be represented by two separate articulation rules. More nuanced requirements, like, for example, UC Berkeley teaches econ, the equivalent of Econ 101, but it combines micro and macro economics. And so a school needs a student transferring in needs both the micro and the macro course, which are often taught separately at community colleges and in fact at universities as well, in order to get credit for that one Berkeley course. So that many to one, where you need both of those to be accepted at the receiving, will also be supported. So
another question is, have you received questions that if this project is successful at a large scale, what is the impact on the staff or employees who do this as their job? In other words, what is the long-term impact on employees? Will we continue to need humans in the transcript evaluation process?
Yeah, that's a great question for society at large when it comes to AI. I will answer that in terms of what I can foresee and I think our intention is. But if general intelligence is released in 2 years, all bets are off. I don't know what impact that has on ATAIN or any of our jobs. But okay, specifically what's planned. If success, it depends what the institution thinks is success. If the institution thinks that success is increasing their articulation coverage, and they increase it so much using the tool with articulation involved professionals that they now have the goal articulation coverage, I don't know if it's 90% or whatever it is. You could say that's freeing up that individual to be involved in other institutional tasks. What do you do once you've achieved a kind of articulation goal? Another way to look at it, or another possibility, is that if you think about how you as an institution or as a system would go about establishing comprehensive, like complete articulation with an out-of-state system, how would you do that so that we have greater credit mobility, more cost savings? We know there's going to be some constraints on resources likely coming up. So how do we maximize the dollars that institutions and students spend? Probably means being able to move your credit around. if you imagine that, then you need to switch to some kind of approach where it's not you need expert eyes on every pair of course-to-course articulation approvals, right? We're talking billions of pairs across every system in the United States. So either we can concede that we don't really want to achieve that. It's just kind of a goal that we try in vain to achieve, but no, we're never going to get there. If we actually want to get there, there does need to be a kind of AI assistive policy. But we have agency. This is humanistic endeavor education is institutions have their own sense of what equates. And I think as a field, we need to be the ones guiding the AI and teaching it what is the right threshold. Is there a pedagogical component that needs to be considered, et cetera, right? Or is it just topics? Right now, the consensus seems to be it's something like 70% overlap in learning objectives, but the conversation should change. And the conversation should be led by students, by institutional leaders, et cetera. And then the algorithm should reflect what that conversation is. So I could imagine that everyone who is currently involved in articulation, who wants to be, I question if faculty who aren't paid to do this want to be involved. But if everyone who wants to be involved in this, I think they can still be involved. And they are part of that kind of alignment team effort, right? Helping keep that algorithm in line. But you're asking me to envision something that's maybe 3 to 5 years out. And that's what I would envision. It's all of those articulation professionals helping keep the AI in line, just the way that OpenAI uses an alignment team to make ChatGPT's answers be well aligned with what most people expect in terms of tone, tenor, risk factors, et cetera. And they don't do it by considering every single question that someone might ask ChatGPT. They take a sample and then they rate how good its response was until it kind of evolves into more the kind of response that they're looking for. And then they release it in the wild to answer questions that they never thought of. And they have increased confidence that it will answer it in a way that that human team would approve of. But again, to start with, this is about improving staff efficiency. We've surveyed articulation officers in published work published in 2023, about 40-something articulation involved professionals in New York from NYSTA. And they say the 3 top stressors in their job is the articulation workload, lack of time to do articulation, and the difficulty in finding candidate equivalent courses. So the platform is meant to address these stakeholder staff express concerns and increase their quality of life.
Thank you, Zach. Several of you have asked questions, and please note that Heather, Laura, and Angi have been frantically responding to many of them. So if you haven't heard us talk about it, please check the chat and see if one of our esteemed panelists here has already responded. But there are a few more questions, and we have about 7 more minutes. So I'm going to go through them as quickly as possible. What do you mean by having the systems talk to each other and sync up to reduce the manual data entry or upload every term? What systems do you refer to? And before you get there, they're also asking specifically about cooperability with Raptor. So Zach, can you just speak again quickly to the systems that you're referring to?
So yeah, the talking to each other refers to the CourseWise platform will need catalog descriptions and articulations and up-to-date catalog descriptions and articulations. So the default is that a specified person at your institution will have a user account and permission to upload the latest catalog descriptions and articulations, but it would save that person time if whatever source they are downloading those from, the CourseWise platform could automatically draw from. So that's one use case, to have the CourseWise platform talk to whatever system contains, those updated articulations and catalog descriptions, there's probably two different systems, right? Or more. So that's one example. There's which is downloading from another system information that ATAIN needs. Then there's the other way around, right? When evaluating a transcript within CourseWise, you'll have the opportunity to say, yes, I want to accept that as credit. Yes, I want to accept that as credit. I want to initiate this as a potential course articulation. And if that course articulation is approved, that gets reflected in our system by the way of us appending the articulation rules that we have from you. But if the current workflow is for you to download the articulations from another system and then re-upload them, it now is missing that articulation rule that you just ratified within our system. So we need to have a way to kind of report back to whatever default system you're currently using, saying, hey, this is now an articulation, so that when we download articulations from that system in the future, it's consistent, and that the decisions made within CourseWise are reflected in that system. Now, if you don't have such a system, or you're not using it very much, ATAIN can be that system. ATAIN can be your institutional, database of record when it comes to articulations. And we're not looking to have any data of yours hidden away in an obscure format that we say is our IP or something like that. By default, unless you opt out, we'll make it very easy to opt out. All of your articulations will be put in a standardized format that we're trying to get support for standardizing this nationwide, and with a Creative Commons BY license put on it. So you can download all your data, all of the actions that you commit in here, you can personally download and own. So yeah, if tests or whatever widget, is now your favorite widget, you're not stuck. You can move over to another system. I think lack of competition is probably what makes a lot of higher ed systems seem like they were developed 20 years ago. So I welcome competition.
Great. And then specifically to Raptor, does it work with Raptor?
I'm not familiar with Raptor. Angi, if we could write that down as well as Test Advantage and make sure we understand the landscape there more deeply.
Yep, we'll make sure we get that. How many user licenses will you be able to provide for institutional staff? Sounds like you're not asking the individual institution to maintain this database. Am I understanding that correctly? Is this platform open source and accessible to prospective students? And finally, what are the user requirements for utilizing the database once it is fully operational?
Okay, those are
Those
quick
are
fire questions there.
in one.
Where are you reading these so I can look at them?
In the things, how many user licenses will the colleges get?
There's not a limit in the pilot. So the limit is how many institutions we can accept to be subsidized under College Futures funding. The number of staff and potential faculty that have an account or leadership that have an account in the system isn't limited. So there will be an admin who you will specify as part of this application and next stage process, and that admin can provision any number of accounts for people.
Great. Is the platform open source? Yes, you've already talked about that. Is it accessible to prospective students?
So the platform is not student facing right now. We intend for it to be in the future, and certainly the transfer planner phase is student facing, student and advisor facing, but the articulation and equivalency evaluation software right now is meant to be tailored first to staff and faculty.
Great.
Right? How can this improve your processes?
Makes sense. What are the user requirements for utilizing the database once it is fully operational?
The user requirements.
I guess it would depend on who's using it.
Yeah, who's using it? Yeah, I hope that can be covered in a future tech description among those accepted. But I know we're at time, and we don't want go over, and we
Yeah.
want to thank you all for attending. So I'll throw it back to you, Martha or Laura, to
Yeah.
wrap us in.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists who have been responding to questions. If we did not address your question live or in the chat feature, please know that we will be developing FAQs based upon your questions. So thank you for that, and great idea, Heather. And so there's a Q&A spreadsheet that will be taking all of the questions and making sure we get back to you. So please pay attention to the website. If we can get back to you individually, we sure will. Thank you again to all of the panelists. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. The information again in the chat, the website, attain.org, has the application, the FAQs, the about us, the about this illustrious team we have here. And I just want to say on behalf of all of them, thank you. I am honored that you allowed us to host this webinar. And again, we'll get this posted as soon as we can to the folks that were not able to be with us today. So thank you all and have a great day.